You're listening to Scaling Up Services, where we speak with entrepreneurs, authors, business experts, and thought leaders to give you the knowledge and insights you need to scale your service-based business faster and easier. And now, here is your host, business coach Bruce Eckfeldt.
Are you a CEO looking to scale your company faster and easier? Check out Thrive Roundtable. Thrive combines a moderated peer group mastermind, expert one-on-one coaching, access to proven growth tools, and a 24/7 support community. Created by Inc. award-winning CEO and certified scaling up business coach Bruce Eckfeldt, Thrive will help you grow your business more quickly and with less drama. For details on the program, visit eckfeldt.com/thrive. That's ECKFELDT.com/thrive.
Welcome, everyone. This is Scaling Up Services. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. And our guest today is Tevis Trower. She is founder and CEO of Balance Integration Corporation. She's also author of The Game Changer's Guide to Radical Success. We're going to talk about the work she does with companies around culture, around leadership. I'm excited to have this conversation. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world right now and a lot of need for leaders. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means and where the opportunities are. And I think at some level where the obligations are for people that are leaders that have opportunities to make change, to make impact in the world. I think now is really fascinating time to be in these positions. So I'm excited to have this conversation. With that, Tevis, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Bruce. I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah. So, well, let's get a little bit of background and kind of context this a little bit, and then we can kind of get into these subjects. So they're important, obviously very timely subjects, but let's understand a little bit about what your background is, how you got into the work that you do, and then we'll kind of dive in.
Okay. Well, I am one of those people who came into the corporate world from the other side of the paradigm. My dad was a Montessori teacher. My mom was a respiratory therapist. No one in my entire family had ever been corporate. Like, that just was not part of the mix. But
interesting.
Through a series of experiences that contrasted with my hippie, no refined sugar upbringing, I really got curious about large organizations and about infrastructures where power and impact is really part and parcel of what they do. And it's going to sound funny, but I served in the U.S. Army. I spent a summer doing a service project in Nicaragua. I'm a beauty school dropout. I mean, you name it, Bruce. I have probably done it. I can hang with anybody.
Diverse experiences. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can hang with anybody. And so through all that, at the end of my undergrad, of course, in history, because that's what all hippie kids do, I was like, I think I'm going to go get a global MBA.
Okay.
Everyone fell on the floor and, what? You're doing what? Bounced my way into what was the top global program at the time, and spent 2 years off and on living in Brazil, working for GM in strategic planning, got an MBA, came back. The economy was in the toilet.
Yeah.
It was 2001, 2002, so Black Thursday or Tuesday, I forget which Black. Whatever horrible economy day that was, that was when I was getting out of grad school. But spent time in a bunch of Fortune 500s, professional services, and executive search and consulting for Korn Ferry. And through all that, one thing I realized is that really our relationship with ourselves as leaders is fundamentally not only the most important determining factor of, I'd say, a sustainable success and satisfaction for ourselves, but also for the organization. So in 2002, I jumped ship.
Mm-hmm.
And started a company really focused on conscious culture and conscious leadership. And I've been at it, believe it or not, 18 years later. It will be exactly 18 years on August 6th. And somehow I ended up talking to you about it. So
that's how you got here today.
This is the apex of my career.
Yeah. It is. So let's talk about so when you come in and work with organizations, work with leaders, what is it that you do, or what change are you looking to instigate inside these companies, inside these organizations?
Well, what's really fascinating is there's usually two drivers for leadership or leadership teams to engage with me. One is when there's an extrinsic pain point, right, which is some kind of lack of performance, some kind of change event, some kind of something happening externally that would make the pain of staying the same greater than the pain of changing. You know the old quote, right?
Yeah.
The funny thing about high performers is they never think they have to change until it's a little bit too late.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you kind of got to get to that oh crap moment, which is what I think a lot of us are in right now.
Yeah.
And having to prioritize it under duress. Whereas if we were adopting lifelong learning and really a depth of self-inquiry that we appreciated, that we are not infallible, which again is a shocking idea, then we'd be doing this all along. So that's one kind of scenario through which companies engage us. The other is when the leader himself or herself, usually the CEO, has some kind of recognition that things aren't working.
Yeah.
And that's actually the best time, right? The combination of the two is where you not only have that kind of leadership buy-in, but you also have the forces of market change or the change event or, in this case, the pandemic, to really kind of to underscore and to navigate with, right? Because obviously that becomes a part of the conversation, but the real foundation of what change is needed is usually far beyond whatever that extrinsic event is. So that's usually how companies reach out to us.
Yeah. And I mean, let's talk a little bit about leadership, because I think, you mentioned it here. We're in the middle of this pandemic, I guess I'll say middle. I think one of the challenges of this pandemic is we don't know exactly. It was a very soft start. We don't know if or when it's going to end.
I know. We just really hope it's not still the beginning, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that's obviously hugely unfortunate and devastating for so many people personally, economically, and it's impacted so many businesses. But it is a fascinating exploration around leadership, because it really, I think, highlights or questions, I think, a lot of people's understanding of what leadership is. And I think a lot of people kind of take this approach of leadership as knowing what to do, knowing what the situation is, having the right answers, showing confidence, like all these kind of things. And you just cannot do that right now. I mean, there's anyone who shows up like that as a leader is either going to be, seen as delusional or just egotistical, right? Like they are just overly confident in their own capabilities to show up like that, given the situation in the world.
Well, all that you just said is actually, to me, the textbook definition of the recipe for imposter syndrome.
Yes, exactly. Well, so and let's explain that for folks that aren't familiar with that term. So when we talk about imposter syndrome, when we talk about leadership and coaching and things like that, what are we referring to?
Well, this is going to be an interesting he said, she said, right? Because I'm just curious how you define it. So what I have seen in working with high performers and senior leaders is that even though we get exposed to all these great ideas that we see on the cover of Harvard Business Review and probably in your column wherever you publish stuff, etc., and every other like executive coach that has a column in Forbes or whatever, we're all being exposed to these great humanistic approaches to leadership, coaching-centric approaches to leadership, collaborative approaches to leadership, vulnerability, authenticity, like all these $20 words. And the reality is that for many of us, the fear-based leadership is what we are, or we have been indoctrinated with from very, very, very young. And this idea of maintaining face, this idea of command and control, this idea that you better look strong, those ideas have really been embedded. And it's not just because of our culture, it's also because of our nervous system. So what happens is if you're motivated to participate in society in a way that involves power-based relationships with others, a lot of times you are so motivated to check all those boxes that have you hold face that along the way you're actually kind of amputating or curating or cutting off, right? Decapitating. A lot of aspects of what is actually your power and what is actually a source of insight and wisdom for you, for fear of looking weak. And it keeps us from being able to inspire. It keeps us from being able to generate collaborative ideation. So there's a lot that kind of backfires from it. But to me, imposter syndrome is when you think you have to be something other than what you are to succeed.
Yeah. I always like to say it's that moment where you're thinking, if they only knew what's going through my head right now, they wouldn't let me have this job.
Yeah.
Right. It's like when your head is more focused on how other people think you should be showing up, or how how they think you're doing things, or what's going on in your head when you really you don't have that confidence, you don't have absolute control or certainty around things, and you're trying to project that, and that becomes a bind. Right?
Yeah.
That puts you in a leadership bind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So
what's the alternative? Right. So if this mode of leadership of fear-based kind of absolute control, we'll call it, one around kind of control and force of will kind of model, obviously doesn't work, or maybe not so obviously, but I would say doesn't work in these kind of situations. What is the alternative? What else can we do?
Well, so I think there are a lot of terms for it. I think that the real question is, how do I be as fully human as I truly am? And I don't mean by that you bring all your neuroses to work and like, oh my God, right?
Dysfunctional leadership.
No. I mean that with the skillfulness, focus of purpose, and alignment of action with whatever the mission and the vision is, that we work collaboratively as true human beings to get things done. And I think that there are a lot of models for that. My friend Raj Sisodia wrote a book called Firms of Endearment. That talks about this. Good to Great is rife with examples of this, in which greatness is really defined as a combination of humility and will. And so do we have a word for that? Well, I think, go crack open your latest HBR, and I'm sure they have a lot of really cool buzz phrases of what you call it. But what's really compelling about right now and right this moment is, I think for those of us who have felt that voice in our heads saying, oh my God, if they really knew what I was thinking, this is really a great moment to say what you're really thinking.
And how do you hear that? How do you hear that voice? How do you find that clarity to be able to communicate that? Because I think that's a challenge for a lot of folks. Certainly a lot of leaders that I've spoken to over the last several weeks.
Yeah, because
it's just kind of, it's muddy, right? They've never exercised this muscle. They've never really had to be in the situation. Where do they start?
Bruce, I love you so much. It's so muddy, right? Yeah. After a lifetime of telling that voice to shut up, right? When you all of a sudden turn around and start to listen to it. Well, what you're pointing out is it's a mastery practice, right? This is not for the weak at heart, right? This is people with a lot of courage who realize they are greater than the sum of their parts when they are whole. And so the change that I've looked for and worked with clients on is really an orientation around radical success. And people hear the word radical and they think, oh, it's radical extremists.
Yeah.
But the textbook, the Merriam-Webster, the Oxford definition of radical is actually coming from your roots. So what happens is I'm pre-oriented to be a leader, and I've got the right personality mix to want to do that. A lot of times along the way, I end up ignoring that voice that we're talking about just to get along and to continue to evolve. And also because I'm conforming in such a way because I want to be a high performer. And I'm afraid if I don't do what's expected of me or what I think is expected of me, I'm afraid I won't get the cookie.
Yep.
So this question of turning inwards towards what is radically true and redefining success from a standpoint of what is true from the roots for you is a pivot. It turns that whole checklist that all of us have a checklist. I don't care who you are. It turns that checklist upside down or maybe inside out and says, okay, if you are going to focus on your eulogy, right, and not your resume, to quote from David Brooks, the conservative columnist, right? Yeah. If you were going to build your success around that, what would be true? And really looking at core values and how do you start to align with them right now? Yeah. Not after you retire, not after you get the next promotion.
Yeah, but not right on the weekends.
Now. Yeah, not on the not only on the weekends. It's fine if you do it on the weekends too. But during your 9 to 12 or 9 to 5 or 9 to 8 or whatever it is these days.
Yeah. Well, and what happens, I mean, I think so many leaders are kind of caught in this context or caught in a position where they have defined kind of leadership, they've defined success, they define those values externally, in terms of the organization or the culture or the context or the politics that they're working within. Like, to turn that inside out, as you mentioned, start looking internally for that can be jarring. I mean, you could have to go through a lot of fundamental structural change to be able to do that effectively.
Oh my! And when the world is going through fundamental structural change, we have two options. We either dive in or we try and rebuild something that probably the conditions no longer exist for anyway. But you bring up something really cool, right? And that is that, so let's say that your company has a new vision or you're trying to navigate a new strategy, et cetera, and you start to talk about stuff like this. Like, most of these things are concepts that all of us say, yeah, I want a more collaborative, blah, blah, blah. We want to be more innovative. Yeah. We want to be more receptive to risk-taking and new ideas, and we want to be able to pivot. And everyone talks about that, or they talk about having a more human and inclusive workplace. You name it, right? These are like the management flavors du jour that everyone's been longing for, I think, for decades. But the thing is, Bruce, we sit around these conference tables, and whether we're C-suite or, just being informed by the C-suite, we hear these concepts and we all nod our heads. Yeah. Because instinctively they resonate. But I call that heads nodding disease. Because if you're not uncomfortable, you nailed it when you described it this way. If you are not getting a little uncomfortable, saying, holy crap, maybe I'm part of the problem, then you have been drinking your own Kool-Aid too long, my friend.
Yeah, and that's big, though. I mean, to be able to, as a leader, both sort of hold the somewhat contradictory positions of, I am a force of change and positive impact, I'm also part of the current problem. I mean, that takes high-level thinking. That's not easy to do.
Yeah, but guess what? That's why not everyone's a leader, right? I mean, you either dig into it or you're a fake. There's two ways. You can call yourself a leader until the cows come home, but last I checked, being a leader means doing the tough stuff.
Yeah. And what does the process practically look like? I mean, is this finding a mountaintop to ponder, your internal values? Is this journaling? Is this doing ayahuasca on a retreat? I mean, what's the process that you're using to help people with these?
I don't know. I know a lot of people full of BS who have done some ayahuasca. It didn't seem to help them.
A lot of purging, otherwise not much change.
So I don't think any of those things are a recipe for failure or success. I think that what is a recipe for failure or success is saying to yourself, as of whatever I have now is good. It is not good enough. Whatever I've done until now is great. I'm grateful for it. It is not great enough. And to really begin to ask yourself these questions about what is the immediate impact I want, what is the long-term impact I want, and what is the legacy I want to leave behind. And we have got to start thinking this way as leaders, because waiting for that kind of thinking to be imposed on us from others, from the government, from other structures of power within our society has led us where we are.
Yeah. It's a very stoic approach. I mean, I don't know how much you get into stoicism or how much you identify with stoicism.
Oh, no, they're great. I love them all. I'm agnostic. I love them all. I love the yogis. I love the Buddhists. I love the Judeo-Christians. But here's the thing, Bruce. most of them are saying the exact same thing I am.
Yeah.
Right. They're saying, get off your duff and live in alignment with your principles now.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow, not after you check another box, or make sure you don't lose a power struggle in your next board meeting or board Zoom or whatever they call them now.
Yeah, exactly.
But the process is, now back to the process, because you asked about that, and I'm grateful that you did. The process is really based around 10 very structured questions that allow you to turn inward, not by throwing out the baby with the bathwater. This isn't about having to quit your job and go work for Mother Teresa, although if you want to do that, that's a great thing. But the question's really about, how do I continue to be this amazing rock star I've always been? How do I take what I've accomplished and actually start to become the human being I've always wanted to be? And through these 10 questions, you really get led into a lot of the ways that we pander to our own idea of what we have to do to be successful, and gives you kind of the neurological hacking to get around it and to call you. It's not self-help, it's self-kick-ass, I gotta admit it.
Okay. So what are some examples? I'm curious about the questions.
Well, hang on, I just happened to have it here. I'd show it to you, but we decided to do this without cameras. Really, really, really simple stuff. So there's questions like, how much freedom and power do I have in creating my life? So this is a rhetorical question, right? Yeah. Because a lot of us, by the time we're 30, 40, 50, we really feel our lives as almost an infrastructure, an invisible infrastructure that's a foregone conclusion. Well, this is my life.
This is my track. I'm on a railroad.
Yeah, right. So then in each chapter, there's stuff for you to turn inwards. There's stuff for you to go to the mountaintop in your own mind, right? You don't have to go to Bali or do weird drugs from roots in Latin America. But there's also, each chapter has an alignment assignment. And these are just like walking around practices to keep you from drinking your own Kool-Aid throughout that week. I really encourage people to take their time on this content, because it's short, it's simple truths you've heard all your life, but you have not acted on, or maybe only every now and then. And so the book's really structured to help you apply a lot of the wisdom that we've been handed down through the ages to build exactly what is that optimal? What is optimal for you? What is, oh my God, I can't believe I'm really in alignment with what matters and with my own potential to be a positive contributor on the planet and to the organization.
Yeah. And what do you find in terms of, I always find that highly effective people, and this may be my own kind of bias in terms of the people that I've worked with or my kind of view of high performance, but I find that high performance people generally have some kind of routines, patterns, habits, rhythms that they've adopted that have served them well in doing this kind of work. Is there anything that you've seen that you kind of suggest or you get people to consider in terms of being able to really kind of integrate this into their day-to-day life?
Yes, I think that the most powerful practice, especially for people who are doing what you're saying, have personal best practices that they have created some rituals and routines around. I think that while that is amazing and beautiful, and that is the foundation that keeps them steady through the storm, the key element to lifelong growth is curiosity.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of times, especially high performers, people like you and me who do the triathlon and we build the business and we study this and, blah, 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 and have a clean diet and all those other things. Like, a lot of times, those actually are just the foundation for building a great life. And the place through which we pivot is by forcing our nervous system to continue to entertain and to experiment with new ideas.
Interesting.
So that we put ourselves into a course of neuroplasticity all along, so that when something like this happens, it's not as jarring. We've got the agility that's built in. I'm not saying that those practices aren't key and fundamental to our resiliency, but I think a lot of times they can also lead to a certain rigidness that we think, oh, that's all I have to do.
I'm fascinated by the neuroplasticity side. So, and this is something I've played around with for a couple of years in different forms, and I do like silly things like I'll brush my teeth with the other hand, I'll put my belt the other way. I even like on Zoom I've unchecked the mirror image on my thing, so that I'm forced to see what other people see on me, and I don't like it's a weird one, but I just find these little ways because my underlying theory on this is that the more that I can find ways to challenge my sort of perspective of things or how things are kind of wired and force me to kind of do it in different ways, it's going to enhance my ability to deal with cognitive change.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your theory on this is on that, but that's it.
No, I think that what's really fascinating is that you can wait for life to force change on you, or you can play with being a lifelong learning person, experiment, try this, try that. I mean, so much of this really boils down to identity, right? Where particularly people who have been rewarded by virtue of an identity they've built suddenly become really defined by that. And so when they scan the world and say, oh, well, that's not me. Not me, yes me. Not me, yes me. Not me, yes me, right? And that's oftentimes the litmus test for whether it's another human being. Is this like me, not like me, right? Or whether it's a litmus test for a cultural experience, whether it's a litmus test for a book, whether it's a litmus test for music, culture, possibilities. This is really something that if we're going to lead, people always say, well, how did you see that curveball coming around the corner? Well, I'll tell you how they saw it. They weren't attached to what was.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah,
they almost welcomed it. I mean, I think that it's people that are really good at that stuff. They, that it's not a negative thing. It's not something I should fear. It's actually something that I'm almost kind of looking forward to. Like, okay, what's the next thing that's going to happen, and how can I use it as an advantage, or how can I take advantage of that changing situation?
I love it that you said that, because one of the things I realized in coaching high performers was that there's this convention in our culture that life can deceive us, right? Oh, that's not what I expected. Why would life I've been deceived by life. I'm walking around in this world of hurt. Why are things going this way? Well, they're going this way because we weren't paying attention to what actually was. And so what I love about this leadership mindset that we're talking about is in the moment that we feel that life has somehow tricked us, you have to realize the only way in which life is a trickster is in our own expectations. Yeah. Life is just being life. It's just unfolding. Are we paying attention and above and beyond our expectations and attachments of identity? I mean, that's really key. And then go to work and create and collaborate and communicate from that perspective. I dare you.
Oh, yeah, I like it. Tevis, it's been a pleasure. If people want to find out more about you, about the work that you do, about balanced integration, about the Game Changers Guide to Radical Success, where do they get that information?
They can find me at balanceintegration.com. That's a www. And they can find me on LinkedIn and on Facebook and on Twitter. I'm Corporate Yogi. I'm not a big tweeter, although I've been having fun with it lately. So
time for change.
You never know. We also have a series of Game Changer chats every Wednesday. If you go onto our website, every Wednesday I'm featuring a really mind-blowingly inspiring pivoter just from my circle of friends, and it's free and it's an informal chat like this. There's absolutely no telling what's going to happen in the scope of those chats. But the book is coming out in August, so you can pre-order for you and all your friends. And it's really good for all ages. I got to tell you, this content works whether you're a 25-year-old trying to figure out what to do after law school, or you're a 50-year-old or a 40-year-old. Like, it's really kind of evergreen. So
love it.
Yeah.
I will make sure all the links are in the show notes so people can click through and get those. Tevis, this has been a pleasure. I love the conversation. Like I said in the beginning, I think this is a huge topic, issue, conversation that folks need to have given the world that we're in right now. And I think that's the way we're gonna, get through it. Right?
Yeah.
Is having leaders that ask these questions and do this thinking and do this work. So really valuable. Lots of great takeaways for our folks here. I really appreciate the time today.
Well, hopefully. And by the way, I know that I'm not exactly the elevator pitch girl. So thank you for being that kind of person as well. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Scaling Up Services with business coach Bruce Eckfeldt. To find a full list of podcast episodes, download the tools and worksheets, and access other great content, visit the website at scalingupservices.com. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter at scalingupservices.com/newsletter.